A wealthy sheriff mocked his own paralyzed daughter, giving her to a rancher as a joke, but months later she shocked the whole town by becoming stronger and braver than anyone imagined. Watch this inspiring story till the end, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful tales. In the rugged lands of Texas, where dust storms rolled across endless prairies and cattle ranches stretched beyond the horizon, Sheriff Walter reigned like a king. He owned half the town, a fortune in land and cattle, and carried his badge like a crown. People feared him more than they respected him, not just because of his money or his lawman's authority, but because of his cold humor. He had a way of laughing at people's pain, turning misery into entertainment. The townsfolk had learned to laugh along nervously, afraid to be his next target. One evening, the saloon buzzed with the usual noise of clinking glasses, a piano in the corner, and cowboys boasting about cattle drives. In strode Sheriff Walter, spurs jingling, his broad hat shadowing his sharp eyes. The moment he entered, the room quieted a little, just enough to show his presence commanded attention. That was when he spotted Rancher Jack, a hard-working cowboy who owned little more than his modest ranch and a reputation for kindness. Walter smirked, already planning his next cruel jest to keep the crowd entertained. "Hey, Rancher Jack!" the sheriff called out, his voice carrying across the saloon like a whip crack. The piano stilled. A few cowboys turned their stools, eager for drama. Walter's grin widened as he pointed toward the door, where his daughter Emily sat in her wheelchair, silent and small under the weight of staring eyes. "You think you're a real man? Here, take my daughter. She can't even walk. Let's see what you do with her." His tone dripped with mockery, daring Jack to respond while the whole saloon waited. Laughter exploded instantly, bouncing off the wooden walls like gunfire. Men slapped their knees, whiskey spilling from glasses as they roared. To them, it was classic Sheriff Walter, cruel humor at someone else's expense. Emily sat perfectly still, her face pale but composed. She was paralyzed from birth, legs unmoving, life limited to the confines of a chair, yet her dark eyes betrayed a storm of humiliation and anger. This wasn't the first time her father had used her to get a cheap laugh, but tonight the sting cut deeper, for reasons she couldn't name. Jack didn't laugh. He was a tall, lean cowboy, sunburned from years of riding fence lines and tending cattle, a man used to hard work and silence. Slowly, he set his glass down, his gaze moving from the sheriff to Emily. Around them, the laughter began to falter as people sensed something unusual in the way Jack studied her, steady, thoughtful, as if he wasn't seeing a crippled girl at all, but someone worth noticing. He rose from his chair, boots scraping the floorboards, and the saloon fell utterly silent. "I'll take her," Jack said at last, his voice even, carrying across the room like a solemn promise rather than a joke. The sheriff blinked, thrown off balance for the first time that night. "But not as a joke," Jack continued, his tone hardening. "She deserves better than this circus you call humor." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Nobody had ever spoken to Sheriff Walter like that. Not in public, not to his face. Emily's lips parted slightly, surprised by the stranger's defense. For a moment, Sheriff Walter just stared, unsure whether to laugh or get angry. Then, with a shrug that didn't hide his irritation, he waved his hand. "Fine," he sneered, masking discomfort with bravado. "Take her. You'll regret it soon enough." He grabbed a bottle from the bar, pretending not to care, though his pride had been pricked in front of half the town. Meanwhile, the onlookers leaned closer, eager to see what would happen next. A cowboy taking in the sheriff's paralyzed daughter, it sounded like the beginning of some tragic story. Emily's heart pounded. Nobody had ever stood up to her father for her sake before. She felt the weight of curious eyes as Jack approached her chair, his expression calm but unreadable. "Miss Emily," he said quietly, offering a hand, though she couldn't take it. "If you want to come, I'll take you to my ranch. No one will laugh at you there." His words were simple, but something in his tone carried respect rather than pity, and it startled her more than anything else that evening. The townsfolk exchanged whispers as Jack pushed her chair toward the door. Some shook their heads, betting it wouldn't last. What use was a paralyzed girl on a working ranch? Jack had little money, no wife, no children, only cattle and dust. Taking her in made no sense to practical minds. Yet as the saloon doors swung shut behind them, Emily felt the cool night air on her face and realized she was leaving the weight of her father's mockery behind. For the first time in years, a spark of hope flickered in her chest. Because Jack saw something no one else did. Beneath the silence and the wheelchair, he'd glimpsed the fire in her eyes, a stubbornness, a hunger for life her father had long ignored. He didn't see a burden, he saw potential. And though neither of them knew it yet, this single act of defiance in a dusty Texas saloon would change both their lives in ways no one could have imagined. Months passed on Jack's ranch, and Emily's life slowly transformed in ways no one in town could have predicted. Jack built her a custom saddle with safety straps and support so she could ride one of the gentlest horses on the ranch. The first time she sat on that horse, the wide Texas sky stretching above her, she felt freer than she had in her entire life. The wind brushed her face, and the rhythmic sway of the horse beneath her brought a sense of movement she had long been denied. She wasn't helpless anymore, she was learning strength. Jack encouraged Emily to read books he ordered from distant cities, on ranch management, finance, art, and even engineering. She devoured them, filling notebook after notebook with ideas. When Jack held meetings with ranch hands about cattle drives or land issues, Emily listened quietly from the porch, absorbing every word. Within weeks, she began suggesting small improvements, better grazing rotations, water storage methods, and even ways to cut expenses. Jack implemented her ideas, and the ranch slowly began running more efficiently. The men respected her sharp mind, forgetting the wheelchair entirely. But Emily wasn't content with just ranch management. One afternoon, inspired by the sunsets that bathed the land in orange and gold, she picked up a paintbrush Jack had brought her. She started painting the hills, the cattle, the wildflowers, and the cowboys at work. At first, it was just a hobby to pass quiet evenings, but soon her paintings became something extraordinary. The local storekeeper in town asked to display a few in his shop, and to Emily's surprise, travelers bought them eagerly, paying good money for her work. Word spread quickly across nearby towns. Sheriff Walter's helpless daughter was not only managing a ranch, but also creating beautiful art that captured the spirit of the West. Orders began pouring in for custom paintings of families, ranches, and landscapes. Emily saved every dollar, determined to prove she could earn her own way in the world. Jack watched quietly, never interfering, proud of the determination blazing in her eyes. She was no longer the girl people whispered about. She was becoming someone remarkable. Then came the day of the flood. Dark clouds gathered one spring afternoon, and heavy rain pounded the hills. The river swelled dangerously close to its banks, threatening to spill across the lowlands where Jack's cattle grazed. Jack and the ranch hands scrambled to move the herd, but the water rose faster than expected. Panic set in as men shouted orders, horses slipped in the mud, and cattle bawled in terror. That was when Emily, sitting on the porch with maps and notebooks, took charge in a voice steady as steel. She directed the men toward higher ground, using an old trail most had forgotten, one she'd studied from Jack's maps weeks earlier. Her quick thinking kept the cattle from being trapped by the floodwaters. She organized riders into teams, made sure supplies were moved to safety, and even calculated which fences to cut so the animals could escape before the river broke through. The men obeyed without question, realizing she saw the bigger picture while they scrambled blindly. By nightfall, the ranch stood safe, losses minimal. Emily had saved everything. When news reached town, people were stunned. Sheriff Walter rode out the next morning, half expecting to see destruction. Instead, he found the ranch calm, cattle grazing on high ground, men repairing fences under Emily's instructions. She sat tall in her wheelchair on the porch, a stack of finished paintings beside her waiting to be shipped to buyers. Her hair glistened in the sunlight, her expression calm but commanding. She looked nothing like the fragile girl he had mocked months ago. She looked like a leader. The sheriff dismounted slowly, his pride shrinking with every step toward the porch. He had given her away as a joke. Certain Jack would regret it. Certain Emily would stay helpless forever. Yet here she was, running a ranch, earning her own living, commanding respect from hardened cowboys who once pitied her. Walter cleared his throat, but no words came out. For the first time in years, he felt small in front of his own daughter. She looked at him steadily. No anger, just quiet strength in her eyes. Jack stepped forward, his weathered face calm but carrying the weight of the moment. He rested a hand on Emily's chair and looked straight at Walter. "You gave her to me as a joke," he said evenly, his voice carrying across the yard. "But she became the strongest person here." The ranch hands paused in their work, listening. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably, realizing the truth in Jack's words. Emily didn't need his wealth, his name, or his approval anymore. She had built her own life out of the ashes of his cruelty. Emily turned back to her stack of paintings, signing her name on the newest one. She didn't gloat or seek revenge. She didn't need to. Her success spoke louder than any words. The sheriff removed his hat, suddenly feeling like a trespasser on land that belonged more to his daughter than anyone else. For the first time in his life, he saw her not as a burden or a source of shame, but as someone greater than himself. And that realization would haunt him far longer than any words Jack or Emily could have spoken.